Smoke your hog, get out your bib, solid, picking a rib. Out the keys to a barbecue and start picking a rib. And kept on picking. Good for them, good for me and you, so let's start picking too. Old King Cole came out of a hole by picking a rib. Picking, picking, smoked the hog on a red-hot log, called it a barbecue. Say, stomping chicken, we've got a new creation. Say, you better start picking 'cause barbecue.
It's time for Pickin' and Flickin' in the Nostril Zone, where we pick a book off my shelf and flick through it. What else could that mean? I'm your host, cartoonist Kyle Bridget, and before we flick through today's pick, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, be a ding-dong daddy, and ding that bell. Now, today I have something very special for you, and it's The Seven Lady Godivas by Dr. Seuss. Originally published in 1939, this is the 1987 edition. Now, I don't know if there's any editions printed between or after. You tend to come across the first and second editions and nothing else in between. And in fact, the copyright was renewed in 1967, so this might have been published in 87 as a way to kind of shore up the copyright again. Now, another reason you don't see this very much is because, as we'll see, this is very much a book for adults. And Dr. Seuss, of course, is synonymous with children's literature. And you do see collections of Dr. Seuss's work that are aimed at adults sort of after the fact. So there's The Secret Art of Dr. Seuss, which I have somewhere, which is like a collection of his paintings. There is The Tough Coughed While He Plowed the Duff, which is a collection of his sort of early college cartoons and advertisements. And then there's Dr. Seuss Goes to War, which is a collection of his war cartoons. And I have all three of those, but I didn't think to grab them. I'm not sure if any of them are actually on my shelves here. They might be downstairs somewhere. So as I said, what I have here is the 1987 edition, and it did have a dust jacket originally. Both editions had a dust jacket. I never had it with this copy. One of the sort of main differences that stands out with the first copy and this copy is it doesn't have this canvas spine. This sort of marbled paper wraps all the way around the edge, I believe. And the sigil here, the sigil Godiva, the family Godiva crest is kind of debossed here. It's like cut away. And I don't mind not having the dust jacket. You know, it's got that feel of an old leather-bound book, like a family history, which is why it opens with this family tree of the Seven Lady Godivas. And that's sort of the premise of this story, that the original myth of Lady Godiva kind of missed the mark, and that in fact there were 7 Lady Godivas, and Peeping Tom was actually just like a family name, and that there were 7 peeping men. And you know, the myth of Lady Godiva, she rode a horse naked through the streets of Coventry, and no one was supposed to look, but Peeping Tom did. But in this story, Peeping Tom, that's just his name, and that there was actually 7 peeping men who were betrothed to the 7 Lady Godivas. And so there's Mitzy, Arabella, Dorcas J, Hedwig, Teenie, Gussie, and Lulu Godiva. And then for the peeping boys, we've got Peeping Tom, Peeping Dick, Peeping Harry, Peeping Jack, Peeping Sylvester, Peeping Drexel, and Peeping Frelinghausen. And they're like the peeping men who are betrothed to the 7 Lady Godivas. And he's got some great little, you know, you could call it chicken fat around here. We've got Captain Jinx of the Horse Marines. Oh yeah, and this whole book is like all about horses. So there's the Godivas, the Peepings, and there's horses. And so we've also got the many famous Broadway hoofers, the Headless Horseman, Man of War, Paul Revere. Here's the first hobby horse. This way to the Ming Dynasty, and down here we just have a blank wall. And way down here, this little apple, there's a little arrow pointing to Dr. Seuss. Now, I don't know if the first edition, if this sort of inside printing is a lot clearer, because I've seen photos of just the Dr. Seuss signature here, and it was much clearer and easier to see. Or I guess maybe that could have been on the original artwork. I don't really know. Okay, so The Seven Lady Godivas, written and illustrated by Dr. Seuss, published by Random House. There's that sigil again. Okay, so here he's actually got it dedicated to the Seven Lady Godivas, and it says, "This historical document is admiringly dedicated." And this is sort of like something you have to keep in mind when you're reading this, is it's presented as a legitimate historical document. You know, that's part of the gag. And these stains here, this book came with these stains. They were already in the book when I got it secondhand. You know, I don't know who did them, but you know, don't judge me. I didn't make these jizzy stains. I'm pretty sure they're coffee, but you know, it is what it is. Okay, let's dive into it. We've got Old Lord Godiva. On the 15th of May in the year of 1066, Lord Godiva, Earl of all Coventry, summoned his daughters to appear before him in the great north hall of the Castle Godiva. Okay, so here we are, Castle Godiva. Here's Lord Godiva. He's going off to the Battle of Hastings, and here's his 7 daughters, the 7 Lady Godivas. The only explanation for them being naked, really, is that they were simply themselves and chose not to disguise it. So they're actually nude for like moral reasons. They're, you know, presenting their true selves. And so the old Lord Godiva, he's going off to war, and he's taking his war horse, which the 7 Lady Godivas are not cool with, because within the context of the story, horses are like new technology and not quite understood at the time. So of course, he gets thrown off his horse, and he fucking dies, man. And the 7 Lady Godivas, they swear an oath over his corpse that they will discover the secret to horsemanship, or horsewomanship, I guess, in this case. And they won't be married until they've discovered these horse secrets. And so they post up a note on their castle door for the Peeping brothers to let them know why they're not getting married yet. And Peeping Tom, Peeping Dick, Peeping Harry, Peeping Jack, Peeping Drexel, Peeping Sylvester, and Peeping Frelinghausen are all like quite aghast that they have to wait now to get married. Our first Godiva sister is Teenie Godiva, and her story actually begins with Hedwig Godiva, the oldest of the Godiva sisters, wakening early and going out to the stable and constructing this book that they hang up here, this like oath book, and it has 7 pages, and that's where they're gonna write their horse secrets, right here outside of the Godiva stables. But Teenie Godiva, she wasn't there when they put up the oath book, because she is too fat for any horse to carry, and so she sits down on a small pile of oats and weeps, because her prospects for discovering a horse truth are, you know, slim to none. No horse truth, no horse truth, no peeping, no nothing. But she doesn't give up. She's walking through the stables, looking at all the horses, and they start opening their mouths. So she thinks, oh, they want me to inspect their teeth. This is some weird thing horses do. And she looks in one horse's mouth, and he bites her nose clean off, completely disfigures her. But she learns her first horse truth, which is, don't ever look a gift horse in the mouth. So in spite of the fact that she was in no shape for kissing, Teenie Godiva marries Peeping Tom that very night. I would rather my wife have a nose. So our next Godiva sister here, this is Dorcas J. Godiva. So she rides a horse using a cart. Like she believes in a technological solution to this problem. But like, you know, her view is obscured from behind the horse. She comes up with this invention so that her vision's not as obscured, which she calls the wagon superior. And this is a wagon that sort of sits above the horse. But then the horse's ass is constantly banging against the wagon. So she decides, okay, now I need to invent the wagon inferior, which rides underneath of the horse. And, I think maybe at the time this wasn't quite as shocking to see. But I think in our sort of like Rule 34 internet world, I feel like this is kind of shocking. I don't know. Under here, I don't know about this scene. Okay, so now she comes up with the wagon anterior, where the cart is actually in front of the horse. But of course, then the horse can't see, and this causes all kinds of problems. And she ends up crashing into this tree, and it like just explodes. And she's completely like pierced with splinters. But she learns her horse truth, which is don't put the cart before the horse. And so she has her wedding, but it has to be postponed for some time because it took more than 5 months to remove enough splinters to make the Lady of Research reasonably safe for Peeping Dick. Now, Arabella Godiva, she had a horse named Brutus. So she would sleepwalk right out to the stables and ride Brutus. And so he was kind of just left to his own devices. And so he ends up drinking this fermented mash at the bottom of the silo and getting drunk. And Arabella is indignant. She's like, he's drunk. My horse is drunk. I want a new horse. But her sisters refuse to give her a new horse. No handouts in the Godiva family. And so she tries to sober him up with some water, and he won't drink. He dies. And this is, of course, her horse truth, which is that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And I think this page just is so well done. I just love Dr. Seuss's illustrations, all this open space, all this negative space, how it kind of just like lets your eyes flow into the image. And it's only in 2 colors, at least on first glance. It's only in 2 colors. You've just got the reds and the blacks with the whites, and that's how you make all of your color and value. And it was a cost-saving technique, but it is really nice to look at. Mitzy Godiva's peeping is an able-bodied seaman, Peeping Jack, who from his perch in the crow's nest of the bouncing Queen Maeve writes her a letter saying, it's been 7 years since the last horse truth, and he's still waiting. And I just love how the sail kind of like just is open on this side, and it feeds into everything, into the waves, and these whales are cute too. I like how the ladder is rendered in white in the rear sail. Just so lovely. So his letter gets Mitzy thinking about the ocean and seahorses. And so she lands on a nautical approach to her horse truth. So she invents this automatic rowboat called the Peeping Jack after her peeping. But the problem with this design is that the horse gets tired and she ends up sinking. So she develops a second version, the Peeping Jack 2, and this version has an auxiliary horse in reserve so that when the first horse gets tired, you can swap it out for the second. But it turns out that actually doing that is much more complicated than Mitzy originally thought, and they end up stepping all over each other and sinking too. But this, of course, leads to her horse truth, which is you never switch horses midstream. Okay, and so now we have Lulu Godiva, and we're told on the 16th of April, 1078. Okay, when did this start? It was 1066, so it's been 12 years. And just one day, Lulu Godiva happens to get kicked by her horse, fairly and squarely, into the loft. But in the hay, to her amusement, she found Peeping Drexel's diamond stick pin, which he had lost there a trysting on a previous occasion. And so, thus, Lulu discovers that horseshoes are lucky. So she writes her horse truth in the oath book and makes a beeline for her man. I just love the hoof prints in red on her ass here. He just really is able to capture a lot with these 2 colors, just the full value red on the pink of the skin with the hard black contour lines on her ass. It just really pops, It's really nice. Very funny. This is my favorite Godiva, I think. Okay, poor Gussie Godiva. It's been 10 winters since, so I guess that's 22 years since they made their oath, and she hasn't been able to marry her man, poor Peeping Sylvester. And she's like, fuck it. and she tries to escape out the window with the tied bed sheets, but old Hedwig stops her, and she's like, no, you're not getting out of here without a horse truth. And she's like, okay, fine. If I can't find one, I'll make my own. And so she's spotted running into the stables with this mysterious package here. And Hedwig can hear through the walls a commotion, a crinkle and crankle, a wrapping paper ripping, and splashing of liquids, and a terrified whinny. And then the stable doors burst open, and it's a horse of a different color. And it's literally a different color. This is the only page you get anything other than the red and the black. And it's used very effectively here. It really stands out. And so she's got her horse truth, a horse of a different color, and she rides off singing, "Hi diddle dester, ho diddle dum, peeping Sylvester, here I come." And so the cheese stands alone. Hedwig Godiva, the last Godiva, and her peeping Frelinghausen isn't getting any younger. He's 70 years old, his fingers is stiffened, he's had to retire from teaching the harp, and he just spends all his time making plans to marry his trusty old Hedwig. She spends another New Year's all alone. Another year passes without a horse truth, and she falls asleep in the hay with her only friend Parsifal. And in the middle of the night, these burglars come in and they abscond with her horse. And she wakes up and she's all alone, and she's like, well, I've got no horses left. I guess that's the end of it. As she's leaving, she realizes her horse truth, which is don't lock the barn door after the horse has been stolen. And so, with her oath fulfilled, she starts off over Coventry with her age-mellowed bridal veil crammed into a satchel, off to marry her ever-patient Peeping. And that's the end of the Seven Lady Godivas. We get the same family tree at the end. So there you have it, the Seven Lady Godivas. Now, this is a tough one to rate because I really do love this book. I love the book itself. I love that I own it. I love that it exists, and just that there's this cheeky Dr. Seuss book. And really, Dr. Seuss was a very important influence on me. You know, probably one of the most important, considering like how much of an influence he had and how early in my life that happened. And so it's very dear to my heart. But I think you have to look at this book in terms of how it relates to the entire oeuvre of Dr. Seuss. And I think it probably isn't reprinted that much for a reason. You know, like even if it had been for adults, but it had been great, I think this would be reprinted all the time. But, you know, it's kind of not great. And you think about a book like The Lorax, which is easily a 5-nostril Dr. Seuss book. This is sub-Lorax, you know, in its prose. The art's pretty good, but still, it's kind of a novelty. So I'm going to give it 2.5 nostrils. You know, that's a middle-of-the-road rating. Maybe it's a little generous. Maybe, you know, I have my rose-colored spectacles on, and it should be a 2-nostril book. But I think it is very interesting. It's a historical anomaly. You know, it's doing some interesting things like being a fake history and being like a kid's book for adults. And so I think it has some historical importance. So 2.5. Yeah, 2.5. So that's all for today. You can join the Patreon. You can get early access to these videos and all of my videos, including Canonically Crumb. And you'll get thanked at the end of the episode in the credits, as you'll see in a minute. And if you don't care about that, well, you can just flick off.
Smoke your hog, get out your bed, solid. picking a rib.